Welcome back to XRP Insider, your home for the latest XRP news, market analysis, and the biggest developments happening across the crypto space. Today's update is one you absolutely do not want to miss, because the next major move for XRP could be much closer than most people realize. A lot of traders are focused on the day-to-day price action, but there are several important signals flashing right now that suggest something significant may be building beneath the surface. Whether you're bullish, bearish, or simply watching from the sidelines, make sure you stay with me until the end, because the information we're covering today could completely change how you view XRP's current position in the market. Right now, one of the biggest mistakes investors are making is focusing only on short-term volatility, while ignoring what the larger timeframes are showing. When we zoom out and look at XRP from a broader perspective, the picture becomes much more interesting. Markets often create their biggest opportunities when sentiment is at its weakest. Historically, many traders become discouraged near major lows and excited near major highs, which is usually the exact opposite of what successful investors do. That's why examining long-term indicators can be incredibly valuable, especially during periods when uncertainty is dominating the market and emotions are running high. One of the most important indicators worth discussing today is the Relative Strength Index, better known as RSI. Looking at XRP's monthly RSI, we can see something extremely unusual taking place. The indicator has dropped to levels that have rarely been seen throughout XRP's history. In fact, current readings are sitting around some of the lowest levels ever recorded on this particular time frame. The reason this matters is because previous occasions, when the monthly RSI reached deeply oversold territory, often coincided with major market bottoms. While history never guarantees future results, these kinds of signals are difficult to ignore when they appear repeatedly over multiple market cycles. If we look back at previous years, we can identify several moments where XRP's monthly RSI reached oversold conditions. During those periods, the market was filled with fear, uncertainty, and widespread negativity. Yet those same periods eventually turned out to be some of the strongest buying opportunities for long-term investors. Whether it was during corrections in earlier crypto cycles or major downturns across the broader market, oversold RSI conditions frequently appeared near important turning points. What makes today's situation stand out even more is the fact that current RSI readings are approaching historically extreme levels, which naturally has many analysts paying very close attention. Now, before anyone gets overly excited, it's important to understand that technical indicators are not crystal balls. Just because an asset becomes oversold does not mean it immediately reverses higher the next day. Markets can remain oversold for longer than many traders expect. However, these conditions often suggest that downside risk may be becoming increasingly limited compared to previous stages of the decline. This is why many experienced market participants are monitoring XRP so closely right now. They aren't necessarily predicting an instant rally, but they are recognizing that the risk-reward profile may be becoming more attractive as price continues to consolidate near these historically significant levels. Let's shift our focus to the shorter-term chart, because that's where things become even more interesting. On the 4-hour time frame, XRP appears to be trading within a tightening range that resembles an ascending triangle formation. This pattern develops when buyers continue pushing price into higher lows while resistance remains relatively stable overhead. As the trading range becomes narrower and narrower, pressure begins to build. Eventually, the market reaches a point where it can no longer remain compressed, and a decisive move usually follows. This is exactly why many traders believe XRP could be approaching a critical moment that determines its next short-term direction. The key area traders are watching is the resistance zone near the upper boundary of this pattern. If XRP manages to break above resistance and secure a convincing close above that level, many market participants would interpret it as a bullish breakout signal. Such a move could attract fresh momentum traders and potentially accelerate buying pressure. On the other hand, if XRP fails to hold its rising support line and begins closing below important support levels, the probability of a downside move would increase significantly. In other words, the market appears to be approaching a decision point where patience may soon be rewarded with clarity. What's fascinating is that while many people are focused entirely on the dollar chart, another metric is quietly providing additional context. This involves analyzing XRP's value relative to gold rather than measuring it exclusively against the US dollar. While this approach isn't discussed as frequently as standard price charts, it can offer valuable insight into how XRP is performing compared to one of the world's most established stores of value. Some analysts believe that examining XRP through this lens helps filter out certain currency-related distortions and reveals deeper trends that might otherwise go unnoticed. When looking at XRP's performance relative to gold, an interesting pattern begins to emerge. Historically, periods where XRP reached major lows against gold often coincided with important bottoms in its dollar valuation as well. This doesn't happen perfectly every time, but there has been enough historical overlap to make the relationship worth studying. Currently, XRP appears to be revisiting a long-term trend area that has previously acted as a launch point for strong recoveries. Even more interesting, some chart analysts believe a potential double bottom structure may be developing within this broader setup, which could strengthen the case for a future reversal if confirmed. This is why many experienced traders argue that the current environment may actually represent opportunity rather than danger. When markets are euphoric and everyone expects prices to rise forever, risk often becomes elevated despite widespread optimism. Conversely, when investors are fearful and confidence is low, opportunities can begin emerging beneath the surface. That doesn't mean XRP is guaranteed to explode higher tomorrow, next week, or even next month. What it does mean is that several long-term indicators are beginning to align in ways that historically have preceded important shifts in market direction. For investors willing to think beyond daily headlines, that's an observation worth considering carefully. At the end of the day, nobody knows exactly when the next major reversal will occur. Anyone claiming certainty is simply guessing. The market could remain range-bound for longer than expected, and additional volatility is always possible. However, what we can do is evaluate probabilities, analyze historical patterns, and monitor key technical levels as they develop. Right now, XRP is presenting a combination of deeply oversold long-term conditions, a tightening short-term structure, and a potentially significant setup against gold. Whether these signals ultimately lead to a major breakout remains to be seen, but one thing is clear. The coming days and weeks could be incredibly important for XRP. If you enjoyed today's update, make sure to subscribe to XRP Insider. Stay tuned for future analysis and keep your eyes on these critical levels because the next big move may be closer than most people think.